0737 local time. October 27, 2025, Eastern Caribbean Sea. The radar alarm cuts through the morning routine. A faint contact blinks into existence at 42 nautical miles, bearing 187, speed 21 knots. No identification, no lights. No response to radio calls. Then a second contact appears, larger. Venezuelan Navy patrol ship. Range 40 miles and closing fast. Both vessels are heading straight into the same intercept zone, and the United States Coast Guard cutter Hamilton sits directly in the middle. The morning had started like any other patrol. Sea steady at 1.5 meters, wind 12 knots out of the east. Visibility stretched for 12 miles across open water. On the bridge of USCGC Hamilton, crew members worked through morning checklists. Coffee steamed in metal cups. Salt air drifted through open hatches. The twin diesels thrummed beneath their feet in steady rhythm. Then everything changed. The operations officer leaned closer to his screen. "Got a runner," he muttered. In the Combat Information Center, screens glowed green and amber as technicians pulled up tracking data. The first contact, now tagged Sierra 1, matched the profile of a steel-hulled, go-fast boat, the kind Caribbean traffickers use to move hundreds of kilos across international waters. Its course line streaked northwest at high speed, but the second contact made everyone pause. Sierra 2, Venezuelan Navy Guam Macuto-class patrol ship. The computer resolved its radar cross-section in seconds. Steel hull, forward gun mount, military-grade propulsion, and it was closing from the opposite direction at 22 knots. On Hamilton's bridge, conversation stopped. The commanding officer traced bearings across the chart table with a pencil. His voice came out quiet but clear. "That's not coincidence. They're crossing our intercept box." He didn't need to explain what everyone already understood. The Coast Guard's mission that morning was simple. Intercept narcotics traffickers in international waters. Stop the flow of drugs heading north toward American cities. But now a foreign navy was moving into the same patch of sea. Same time, same location, same target zone. In the Combat Information Center, red lights dimmed as technicians fine-tuned their equipment. The electronic support measures console listened for radar signatures or fire control pings. Nothing yet. The surface plotting display showed 3 icons moving across the screen. Hamilton, the go-fast boat, the Venezuelan patrol ship, all converging into a tightening triangle. Above the main screen, a single line glowed. Live feed to Sector Key West. Every frame was being transmitted in real time to command centers across Florida. Every decision would be recorded. Every movement documented. The captain's voice cut through the tension. Hold course. Record everything. At 0741, the bridge attempted standard hails. Unidentified vessel, this is United States Coast Guard cutter Hamilton operating in international waters. You are closing at high speed. Identify yourself immediately. Silence, then static. The communications officer adjusted his headset. Try channel 13, another hail went out across multiple frequencies. Nothing came back. Through binoculars, the Venezuelan ship's outline sharpened into focus. Gray hull slicing through the swells. Forward gun mount visible against the morning sky. Radar dome turning in measured sweeps. This wasn't a commercial vessel that wandered off course. This was military hardware, deliberate, controlled, and getting closer. The silence itself had become a message. The captain gave his next order without hesitation. Set condition 3. Launch prep for the Dolphin. The deck crew moved with rehearsed precision. On the flight deck, the orange and white MH-65 Dolphin helicopter rolled into position. Rotor blades unfolded under the bright Caribbean sun. Fuel lines disconnected with metallic snaps. The turbine engines started to wind up. Below deck, the 26-foot over-the-horizon rigid-hull inflatable boat armed its systems. Cameras activated. Body cameras started recording every motion and every word. Hamilton shifted from routine patrol to intercept mode in less than 2 minutes. Efficient, deliberate, rehearsed. 100 times before in training exercises. But this time, it was real. At 0746, the Dolphin lifted from the deck. Rotor wash scattered spray across the stern as it climbed into the clear morning air. From its elevated position, the full tactical picture came into view. 3 vessels, 3 different agendas. 1 smuggler trying to escape. 1 Navy ship maneuvering to interfere. 1 Coast Guard cutter holding the thin line between law enforcement and international confrontation. Inside the Combat Information Center, technicians tracked bearings and closing speeds with surgical precision. The collision plot tightened on their screens. The Venezuelan patrol ship's projected course would pass less than 800 yards from Hamilton's bow. At these speeds and this range, that distance would close in minutes. Maintain speed, the captain ordered. We give them the right of way, we hand them the narrative. The helmsman's knuckles went white on the wheel. Aye, sir, holding steady. The tension climbed like heat under steel plating. Every person on the bridge felt it building in the air. This wasn't training anymore. This was a test of nerve played out across open water with cameras rolling and command centers watching. At 0749, the go-fast boat made a sharp turn north. Whether from panic or calculation, it dragged both larger vessels deeper into the intercept zone. The smugglers were using the two warships as cover, playing one force against the other. They're using us as a shield, the executive officer said. The captain nodded once. Then we used the rule book. The rigid hull inflatable boat splashed down hard into the Caribbean swells. 6 boarding officers throttled up immediately. The twin outboards roared to life. Spray glittered in the sunlight as the inflatable surged forward, bow leaping through the chop. Overhead, the Dolphin helicopter fired a single red flare, a non-lethal international signal for danger. The flare streaked across the sky between both warships, burning crimson against the blue morning. The flare reflected off Hamilton's bridge windows. It reflected off the gray hull of the Venezuelan ship. For 10 seconds, the entire sea fell silent. Engines idled. Radios hissed with static. Every sailor aboard both vessels felt the weight of those 10 seconds. Proof that peace at sea often balances on something thinner than radar paint. Then the chase resumed, the rigid hull inflatable carved through the waves, closing meter by meter on the fleeing go-fast. The cutter held course, instruments steady, cameras recording every frame. The morning sun climbed higher in the eastern sky, glinting off steel hulls and salt spray as the United States Coast Guard prepared to make contact under the gaze of a watching world. From Hamilton's bridge, the scene unfolded across multiple screens and through binocular lenses. A choreography of power, discipline, and mounting tension. At 0757, the inflatable closed within striking distance of the go-fast boat. Spray burst over its bow like shards of glass. The Dolphin helicopter hovered at 400 feet, its optical turret painting infrared light over the entire chase sequence. Inside the Combat Information Center, operators spoke in clipped military tones. Range to target. Bearing drift. Closing velocity. The air was thick with the hum of electronics and the rhythmic tap of keyboards inputting data. On the video feed, the smuggler's boat pitched wildly in the swells. 3 heat signatures crouched low near the stern. They were tossing objects overboard. Packages burst into white plumes on radar as they hit the water. Evidence dump confirmed, the sensor technician called out. Record everything, but aboard Hamilton, the commanding officer was watching something else. The Venezuelan patrol ship Sierra II had altered course to shadow Hamilton's starboard quarter. It maintained a distance just under 1,000 yards. Its speed matched the cutters perfectly, as though the two vessels were tethered by invisible wire. Bridge, Combat Information Center. Venezuelan hull now 0.8 nautical miles, bearing 130 relative. Copy, the captain replied. His eyes didn't move from the window. Keep them there. Don't blink. On the starboard wing, sailors scanned through binoculars. The Venezuelan ship loomed against the morning glare. Deck crew visible along the rails, helmets glinting. The forward gun mount turned slightly, angled just off axis. High enough to signal readiness, low enough to deny direct threat. It was unmistakably a display of posture. A warning without words. At 0802, the boarding team made contact. Hooks swung over the smuggler's gunwale, securing the hull. The roar of twin outboards gave way to shouted orders in English and protests in Spanish. Then silence. Combat Information Center, boarding team reports suspects secured, came the radio call moments later. Cargo confirmed. Multiple bales. Probable cocaine. Approximately 1 ton. Copy. Maintain chain of custody. The executive officer responded, "We have company watching," because the Venezuelan ship hadn't turned away. It was still closing. At 0806, the Combat Information Center radar showed its course tightening toward Hamilton's flank. Bearing difference down to 70 degrees, range shrinking by tens of yards every minute. The electronic support console registered a faint X-band spike. Radar scan mode. Not fire control, but close enough to make every nerve ending prickle with awareness. "Captain," the tactical officer said carefully. "They're brushing the boundary cone," noted, the captain said. His voice stayed calm and steady. "We stay legal. We stay filmed. We stay professional." He stepped onto the bridge wing. The morning wind tore at his jacket collar. The scent of aviation fuel hung thick in the salt air. Out across the sea, the Venezuelan cutter's turbines growled low and even. Between the two vessels stretched a mile of blue water, now tense enough to hum. Inside the Combat Information Center, every station worked the playbook. One operator logged bearing to the 10th of a degree, range measured to the yard. RPM estimates calculated by wake morphology. Another operator annotated the continued AIS silence. On the large repeater display, a green wedge marked Hamilton's safe water cone. The protected space no foreign ship was allowed to breach without justification. Helm maintained 20 knots. "Steady on course 085, the captain ordered. "Aye, sir." 20 knots 085. On the aft deck, the rigid hull inflatable returned. Engines roaring as it surged up the recovery cradle. The boarding officers were soaked to the bone, faces streaked with salt spray and adrenaline. Evidence crates gleamed wet and white under the deck lights. Cameras rolled as crew members logged timestamps and sealed each package with official tape. The Coast Guard's discipline was methodical, almost ceremonial. Every clip, every tag, every word recorded for legal proceedings that would follow. At Airweight 2, the Dolphin helicopter banked wide, circling both vessels in slow arcs. From above, the geometry was perfect. One smuggler subdued and secured, one cutter holding course and speed, one foreign warship pressing the edge of provocation. The pilot transmitted a single coded burst. A non-lethal laser pointer flashing across the Venezuelan bridge. A silent warning recorded in the optical log. On Hamilton's bridge, restraint felt physical. Shoulders locked, jaws set. Breaths measured and controlled. Every instinct screamed to maneuver, to act, to respond. But professionalism meant endurance. It meant holding the line even when provoked. "We don't drift into their narrative," the captain reminded his crew. "They want a reaction. We give them procedure." At EO-816, the Venezuelan ship crossed within 800 yards. Dangerously close by any maritime standard, its searchlights blinked once. White cones sweeping across the sea like a stage performance. No voice transmission. No signal flags. "Only visual dominance. They're filming," the executive officer muttered. "They want the footage." "Good," the captain said. "So do we." At DRE-819, the Dolphin called bingo fuel and turned toward Hamilton, still recording every second of the encounter. The Venezuelan ship matched speed again. Bow pointed dead ahead. Both hulls now locked in parallel courses like mirrored steel. The only sound was the sea itself. Engines thrumming beneath the skin of the water. In the Combat Information Center, someone whispered, "It's like a duel without bullets." "Exactly," the watch supervisor said quietly. "And the one who flinches first loses." By USCGC, the sun had risen high enough to flatten the sea into sheets of blinding silver. The cutter held steady. The Venezuelan ship held its line. Between them stretched 1,000 yards of silence, charged, deliberate, a balance so fragile that even the gulls circling overhead seemed to hesitate before crossing it. At 8:08:27, the tension finally began to break. But not with words or weapons. The Venezuelan patrol ship's turbines changed pitch, a deep mechanical sigh that rippled across the flat water. The ship held its position for nearly a full minute. Then it slowly angled west. No radio signal, no flag salute. Just a measured withdrawal, deliberate and ceremonial. Its wake shimmered under the late morning sun, widening across the water like a fading scar. On Hamilton's bridge, the commanding officer gave a single nod. "Maintain visual until she's out of radar range," the reply came in unison. "Aye, sir." The Combat Information Center logged every frame. At Airweight 31, the Venezuelan hull dropped below 2 miles. At Airweight 39, she was just a faint echo on radar, her transponder still silent. Hamilton eased her throttles, returning to standard patrol speed. The captain stepped inside the bridge, poured a cup of coffee, and finally let out the breath he'd been holding for nearly an hour. "Log it," he said. "Hostile interference." No engagement. That short sentence would echo far beyond the Caribbean. In Washington, it was 08:27 Eastern Time. The video feed from Hamilton had already reached the National Security Council. Analysts from the Pentagon, Homeland Security, and the State Department watched the standoff replay in complete silence. On the large situation map, 2 colored icons circled each other, refusing to collide. The term scrolling across the briefing screen read Gray Zone Maritime Interference. It sounded clinical. But everyone in that room understood its weight. For weeks, Venezuelan patrols had been shadowing American operations near Grenada and Dominica. They were angry after 2 drug smuggling boats linked to their navy were destroyed in joint Coast Guard and Navy actions. Caracas had accused Washington of maritime aggression. Now, with the Hamilton footage, the United States had clear evidence that Venezuela had escalated again. Without firing a shot, they had challenged American operations in international waters. The senior director spoke first. "This was designed to test our nerve, not our guns." And, the National Security Advisor asked. "We passed," the director said. They wanted a reaction for propaganda. Instead, they got restraint on tape. Back aboard Hamilton, the crew cleaned down the flight deck. The Dolphin helicopter was refueled and secured in its hangar. The inflatable boat crew, still dripping seawater and sweat, stacked the seized narcotics into labeled crates, 1.1 metric tons of cocaine and chemical precursors. Technicians logged every timestamp, every sample, every signature. The air was thick with salt and diesel fumes, but the mood was quiet. Sober pride, not celebration. By ERA 846, the horizon ahead was clear. The Venezuelan warship had vanished into haze. Its radio silence remained unbroken. Above the Caribbean, a Navy P-8 Poseidon orbited at altitude, relaying high-resolution imagery back to Florida. Infrared showed the departing Venezuelan wake, the heat bloom of Hamilton's engines, the inflatable boat returning home, all sealed in digital record. The United States now had a perfect forensic footprint of the encounter. Proof against any diplomatic distortion that might come. As the morning wore on, the sea turned a brilliant blue-green. Sunlight flared off the cutter's white hull. The Stars and Stripes flag rippled from the mast in steady rhythm. The crew gathered on the aft deck, faces streaked with salt, eyes tired but steady. No one spoke loudly. They all understood what they had just done. They had stood within a mile of a foreign navy, captured smugglers carrying over a ton of cocaine, upheld law in international waters, and they had done it all without firing a single round. The executive officer joined the captain on the bridge wing. "Sir," he said quietly, "that was closer than anyone will ever know." The captain nodded. "That's the job. We don't flinch. We don't brag." He turned toward the horizon where the Venezuelan cutter had disappeared and added, "In this business, silence is the message." Hours later, in press rooms and intelligence briefings across Washington, that silence would be interpreted 100 different ways. To some, it would mean strength, proof that American composure could hold even under direct provocation. To others, it would look like hesitation, an open invitation for the next challenge. For the men and women aboard Hamilton, it meant something simpler: discipline under pressure. As the cutter resumed her patrol track toward Puerto Rico, the rhythmic vibration of her engines filled the air once more. A low, confident hum that seemed to declare the mission complete. Above, gulls wheeled in the sunlight. Below deck, evidence was sealed and reports transmitted. The Caribbean returned to its ordinary calm, but the digital trail remained. Every bearing, every image, every second of restraint stored in servers half a world away. The Hamilton hadn't just seized narcotics that morning, she had proven something more important. American resolve doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And that whisper can be heard across oceans. Subscribe.